afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the webinar entitled The Resilience of Monarchies in the Middle East and North Africa, Cases from Morocco, Jordan, jointly organized by Departments of Political Science and Public Administration and International Relations. Speaking on behalf of the two departments, we try to bring different issues and developments within the contemporary international system and international relations to the attention of our esteemed audience by organizing seminars and or webinars as much as we can. And we would like to state once again that we will continue this endeavor in the future, and hopefully we will be with you on different topics with different valuable speakers as well. Thanks once again for supporting us with your participation and interest in this regard. Today we actually have three distinguished speakers who will share their valuable knowledge and experience on this important, yet at the same time complex and complicated topic. And as the moderator of this event, I would like to thank them once again for being with us and their contributions to this webinar. Before we start, I would like to give you some information about the course of the webinar and, of course, our valuable speakers. First of all, our speakers will make their presentations for around 10 minutes each, and following the presentations, we will have a question and answer session for a maximum of 20 minutes. And since this event is planned for maximum of 1 hour, we will try to stick to the time limitations as much as we can. So Dr. Francesco Colin will be the first speaker, and Dr. Colin is visiting fellow at the International Institute of Social Studies of Erasmus University, Rotterdam, and lecturer in politics and international relations at the American College of Mediterranean. His research focuses on citizens and civil society engagement at the intersection of local, national, and international governance. He published his research by various prestigious journals, including Mediterranean Politics and British Journal of Middle Eastern Studies. He is also a senior researcher with the Moroccan Institute of Policy Analysis in Rabat and a contributor to the Arab Reform Initiative. Dr. Colin's presentation will focus on how Morocco surfed the democratic tsunami, describing the key events of 2011 and the subsequent process of consolidation. Specifically, he will focus on the role of the constitutional reform and the way in which it impacted governance processes. Our second speaker is Dr. Alfonso Casani. Dr. Casani is an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the Complutense University of Madrid. He is a research associate of the Group of Studies on the Arab and Muslim Societies and coordinator of the Permanent Group on Comparative Politics of the Maghreb and the Middle East of the Spanish Association for Political Science and Administration. His research interests focus on the study of political Islam, opposition dynamics, and social movements in North Africa, particularly in Morocco and Libya. His presentation will focus on the Gaza war protests as an example of the persistence of social discontent in Morocco despite the regime's ability to navigate the 2011 uprisings. The current reaction to the war is contextualized within the 2020 normalization agreement between Morocco and Israel and the opportunities arising from the country's evolving consensus on the Palestinian issue. Many of you know our third speaker very well, Professor Nur Köprülü, Vice Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Administrative Sciences and Head of the Department of Political Science and Public Administration. Professor Köprülü works on democratization processes in the Arab Middle East in the post-Arab uprisings period. She has published articles on Jordan in several prestigious journals in this field, such as Middle East Policy, Middle Eastern Studies, and the British Journal of Middle Eastern Studies, analyzing the consolidated monarchies, regime types, and opposition using Jordan as a case study. And her presentation will analyze the resilience of the Kingdom of Jordan by illustrating how did the regime accomplish in sustaining its stability with its regime type through the mechanisms of both launching reforms and allowing public protest to a certain degree. Concomitantly, Professor Nur will try to unpack what is new in Jordan's opposition and political landscape today. Lastly, she will address the reflections of the escalation in the region on Jordanian-Israeli relations. Yes, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our speakers, and Dr. Colin will present first. Yes, Dr. Colin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim, and thank you also to Nur for the invitation and to the Near East University for the welcoming us in this seminar. Both Alfonso and I are really happy to have this opportunity to talk about Morocco. And indeed, my presentation is going to focus on this tension in Morocco existing since 2011 of being both and at the same time an executive monarchy but a participatory democracy. And especially the way in which Morocco was able to, it's going to be really descriptive in a way to tell the story about how Morocco managed to surf this democratic tsunami. Because indeed, in 2011, Morocco is, as many other countries in the Arab region, affected by the Arab Spring, you know? And the movement that is going to embody these calls for change is going to be the 20 February movement, named in this way because of the first day in which many Moroccan youth start to coalesce to protest against corruption. The marriage of politics and money was another very frequent slogan, and started asking for change in Morocco. One of the key points that allowed the Moroccan government to surf this democratic tsunami and this wave of change was its capacity to react very timely to the demands for change. And as early as March, the Moroccan monarch Mohammed VI is going to do two speeches in which he is going to call for broad constitutional reform. The constitutional reform is not necessarily going to be attached to the demands of the 20 February, but it's going to be more related to the ongoing process of regionalization that Morocco was engaging. But nonetheless, not only there is going to be a process of constitutional reform that is going to be then framed by the press as a way to overcome or respond to the protest of the 20 February movement. This process of constitutional reform is also trying to take a participatory fashion, a participatory shape. A consultative commission is going to be established as early as the 11th of March, just 2 days after these announcements of a constitutional reform. And this commission took the charge of consulting the various sectors of Moroccan society, both political and otherwise, political parties, labor unions, civil society organization, to try and make consolidate these demands for new constitutions. Once again, very quickly, as early as July, there is going to be a text of this new constitution that is going to be proposed for first shown in the parliament and then proposed for a referendum to be approved. It's going to be approved by a wide majority of the population, but this does not mean that there were no critics to the constitutional text, which does not really affect the position of the monarch at the center of the political game. But at the same time, there was, I'm going to talk more about this a little later, but just to anticipate, there was some more respect, or at least reference to human rights and basic freedoms that seemed to provide an opening for actual political change in Morocco. Besides the legal change with the constitution, in November, we have the first election of the Justice and Development Party, the first government formed with the majority from the Justice and Development Party, which is PJD following the French acronym. It's a moderate Islamist party that was one of the main groups considered to be part of the opposition by the time. It's a very important moment because it shows that there can be an alternative political voice at one of the highest level of Moroccan policymaking, showing that there may be change. But as fast as there was this calls for change and the demands for change, there were also a return to the repression. As early, once again, as 2013, 2014, there is going to be a cabinet reshuffle because of an internal crisis in the government coalition that is going to bring into the government of Abdelillah Ben Kiran of the PJD figures that are very close to the palace. Once again, starting to question the independence and the capacity of this government to do what it wants outside of the guidelines of the palace. And these years are also the years in which there is going to be a renewed crackdown on personal freedoms, in particular the freedom of speech and association. The press is going to be specific organizations that work with investigative journalists are going to be attacked. Specific journalists are going to be persecuted. And from then onwards, there is this sort of more frequent and systematic attacks to individuals and human rights organizations as well, especially the Moroccan Organization of Human Rights. I just want to mention that in 2015, the advanced regionalization organic laws are going to be approved, which is an important step to engage with this redeployment of the Moroccan state. But then again, to the decline of this democratic change in Morocco and to the consolidation of the power of the monarchy post 2011. In 2016, there is going to be another legislative election where the PJD is also going to win, but Abdelillah Ben Kiran is not going to be able to form the government because of the opposition and the blockages, especially driven by those parties that were closer to the palace. This blockage is going to last for months, causing a lot of shame for political elites and calling for Ben Kiran's incapacity to actually form a government. The blockage is going to be ultimately resolved when the king is going to appoint another member of the PJD, Saadine El Othmani, as a prime minister, as a head of the government, to actually form a coalition that is also going to include, once again, very pro-palace parties, a lot of parties that are close to the palace, and that is going to start materializing and consolidating this loss of control of opposition against the monarchy of the legislative arena. As the sort of key moment or the lowest point of popularity of the PJD government and the moment in which the political changes, the declines really in Morocco, it's going to be the signature of the Abraham Accords in 2020. I'm not going to talk about this because this is mostly Alfonso's part, but I would just want to mention that this is a moment in which the popularity of the PJD and the government is really plummeting and reaching its lower standards. To then finally, with a third legislative election in 2021, the majority party is going to be the National Rally of Independence, this RNI, which is once again very close to the palace. Its president, Aziza Khanouch, is one of the few, if not the only politician that is invited, just as an example, to break the fast during Ramadan at the residence of the monarchy. So it's someone that is really close to the power. And he's going to be able to form a government with just two other coalition parties, making it a very consolidated pro-palace executive government. But besides this back and forth of concessions and consolidation of the monarchy, the tension of Morocco being both a participatory democracy and an executive monarchy is embodied indeed in the constitutional text. The constitution that describes Morocco as a participatory democracy, right, at least on paper, and that includes a series of freedoms that are supposed to allow citizens to enact this participatory democracy, including the freedom of association, the fact that civil society associations are supposed to be part of the public policy processes if they so wish, the creation of different consultative commissions, the right to present petitions and legislative motions. And these are two examples of one of these instances of dialogue and consultation below, and the signature of a petition. And these mechanisms are implemented both at the national and the local level. But while there is this opening and this openness to more citizens' participation, it is also matched by the fact that the king remains, even in the 2011 constitution, even within this participatory democracy, the core of Morocco's political system. Besides this article, which I think is particularly valuable to highlight the status of Moroccan king as someone that is outside of all accountability. He is also maintains very strong executive powers as president of the Council of Ministers. He is the head of the Supreme Council of the Judiciary, so holding a lot of judicial power. And at the same time, his speeches tend to be the way in which political priorities are established. There was some negotiation when the Président was the head of government, but now within the current government head by the RNI, it's really the king that sets the priorities of the country. These even these participatory mechanisms become a way for the Moroccan government to reestablish and redeploy its control on the local level. And I'm just going to conclude showing you this graph, which is once again a way to show the way in which even through decentralization and an advanced regionalization process, the government managed to reestablish its power. Since 2015, this is the way in which Morocco works at the local level. There is, and you can see it here on the right, three levels of elected bodies at the regional, the provincial or prefectural councils, and the municipal councils. These are elected institutions, elected democratically. But to each level of governance, there is a parallel level of governance that is filled with centrally appointed state representatives that belong to the Ministry of Interior. And the way in which these two different silos of government interact is that to all the principal decisions of the elected level of governance, the unappointed level of governance, there needs to be a check. So for example, and just to conclude on this point, if at the municipal level you want to vote the budget, you can vote the budget, but then the budget needs to be approved by the respective state appointed official. Same for the prefectural and provincial level, same for the regional level, allowing in a way that even if there is more participation, even if there is more decision, there is still a central control over the state that is exercised through the Ministry of Interior, which is appointed by the king. With this, I'm going to leave it to Alfonso so that he can talk a bit more in depth about Gaza and Palestine.
Yes, thank you very much, Francesco. And of course, I wanted to extend my thanks to Professor Ayberk and Köprülü as well as to the nearest university, and good afternoon to everyone. So I wanted to speak now about the impact of the Gaza war in Morocco and the social mobilizations that have emerged since the beginning of the war last October 2023. And we have chosen this topic because we think it's a very good example of the persistence of social unrest in Morocco, despite the ability of the Moroccan regime to navigate the popular uprisings of 2011 which is interesting because it poses a contrast between this first part that Professor Colin just explained and the social mobilizations that we're witnessing. In addition, it also shows the impact of the 2011 uprisings and the ability of the opposition to gain experience and to learn from their building of relations there and the mobilizations and activities that they created and developed in 2011. The Gaza war has provided, we could say, either a window of opportunity for the opposition, for social mobilizations, or at least an escape valve for social unrest. And this is interesting because we have to take this into account, as Professor Colin mentioned, within the context of the signing of the Abraham Accords by Morocco in the year 2020. Which means that the war that is currently ongoing in Palestine is an even more sensitive issue for Morocco, which somewhat becomes involved due to its relations with Israel. Now, for us, and this is a topic that we've worked on quite a lot. This context is especially interesting because it shows, or because it is affected by the ability of the Moroccan regime to impose and change a hegemony, which is going to shape the positions of all political actors within Morocco. And with this, I mean, it's going to show the ability of the palace, we could say, because at the end, foreign policy, we cannot forget that it is a reserved domain of the palace of the king directly. It's going to show its ability to create a consensus that sustains the regime's legitimacy, and in this sense to change as well the consensus. And that's what's going to happen in the year 2020. Now, the consensus existing regarding the Palestinian issue and the relations with Israel is going to be broken, and it's going to be changed and extended to cover the new normalizations agreement signed by Morocco and Israel. And with this, the red lines of the regime that ensure the respect of this consensus are going to move to shield the regime. And this is interesting because as the red lines move, they also create opportunities for the opposition to find new spaces and new issues to protest. And this is what we're actually seeing. I wanted to make a couple of nuances about this, which are interesting. The first of all, the first one regards what are called the norms of Arabism, which, as you can see in the slide, are the intersubjective expectations concerning the pan-Arab unity, the independence from the West, and the opposition to Zionism or to Israel, which all Arab countries are expected to follow in their foreign policy. Now, they might not do so very, let's say, these norms of Arabism might not shape completely their foreign policies, but they are not expected to contradict them explicitly, at least. And that's what's going to happen with the Abraham Accords. No, the Abraham Accords are a furthering away and a contradicting of these norms of Arabism. And this is what's going to break the consensus with the Moroccan society. The second thing that is important is that Morocco, in reality, had already good relations with Israel. In fact, a diplomatic liaison office had opened in 1994. From 1994 to the year 2000, it was closed because of the Second Intifada, but never had Morocco so explicitly supported Israel as with the Abraham Accords, and that's the interesting thing. So that's going to mobilize the population, that's going to mobilize civil society, and we consider that this is interesting because it's going to show, or it's going to stress the dual role of civil society, which is on the one hand a resource for consolidating state hegemony. That means it's a resource for the regime, for the state to create its own legitimacy, but at the same time, we could say it's a subaltern or a subversive, excluded actor that has the ability to challenge that hegemony, to challenge that consensus, and that's what we're witnessing right now. Of course, this we could not understand, and that would be the last nuance. We could not understand the signing of the Abraham Accords without taking into account the bundle deal nature of this agreement and the recognition of Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara by both the US, the United States, in the year 2020, and a year later by Israel, which actually stresses the nature of the national territorial integrity of Morocco as the main driver of its foreign policy, which means that we have to understand this as a pragmatic decision for Morocco to strengthen its territorial integrity claims. Now, if we move to the next slide, what we see when we look at the Gaza war is, first of all, if we look at it from the state's perspective, from the regime perspective, it's a more silent and tamed reaction than in other conflicts, and that would help us to understand how has the signing of the agreements affected the Morocco's reaction to this current war. So we see a more tamed reaction. We see a reaction that sticks to the traditional solutions and to the traditional diplomatic initiatives, the two-state solution, and that adopts actually quite an equidistant discourse, putting in the same level the Hamas and the Palestinian actions with Israel actions. Now, looking at the opposition, which is what actually interests me, Francesco and I, we've split these reactions of the opposition, or these actions of the opposition, into three different levels. First of all, in the institutional dimension, what we're going to see is an intensification of the inclusion-exclusion dynamics. Why? Because of when the red lines move, the red lines are actually going to disable the parliament as a space for contestation, which means that the expressions in the parliament or expressions within the institutions are actually going to be very, very rare, because all political parties are forced to align with the regime's stance and the regime's position. And this is stressed, we could say, by this call from the government, from the RNI, the political party leading the government right now, to rally around the official position of the Kingdom of Morocco, which calls, and I quote directly, which calls on both sides to avoid violence. And we see here this equidistance that I was mentioning before. So expressions are going to be very rare. We could cite an exception, which is going to be the PJD, that signed the agreements in the year 2020, which was this Islamist party that had been very vocal against normalization and which is going to experience a very marked, strong decline in the elections. In the 2021 elections, it passes from 126 seats to 13 seats only, and among other factors, is going to be very influenced by its decision to sign the agreements. So after when it becomes part of the political opposition, we could say it's going to actually try to reshape its image. It's going to be very critical about the following steps of the normalization agreements. It's going to try to explain that it signed the agreements because it was a government actor, but not that it signed them as a mere political party, we could say, in whose case it would have opposed the agreement. So it walks a very thin line, but it's a very good example of opposition within the institutional dimension while respecting the red lines. Now, if we move to the second dimension, to the practical dimension, shows actually the street level opposition, the contentious practices of the opposition, and what we're going to witness actually, it's a consolidation of an included-excluded cleavage, which we could say it's actually a pro-palace or pro-constitution of 2011 against constitution of 2011, which is going to oppose all the palace political parties, could say, against the opposition. And this is interesting because it shows how the dynamics and relations build on from the 2011 experience. So what we're going to see actually, it's the creation of a transversal cross-ideological coalition called the Moroccan Front for Supporting Palestine and Against Normalization, which is going to be formed in the year 2020, but it's going to be very, very active since 2023 by organizing national rallies in both Casablanca and Rabat with a monthly nature, by organizing weekly mobilizations as well. And lastly, to finish, I wanted to highlight the discursive dimension, which is going to show first of all, an alignment of this coalition that I was mentioning around human rights in Palestine. And this is interesting because it shows how the Islamist secularist cleavage has been overcome, and it has moved towards a more pro-democratic, pro-human rights stance. It shows the prevalence of Arabness as an identity factor. We could say the prevalence of the norms of Arabism that have been broken by the Moroccan state, but at the same time it shows how the discourses issued by this Moroccan Front don't touch on the speeches given by the king or of the positions adopted by the palace and the government after 2023, which actually showcases the awareness of the red lines existing in Morocco and the fear of a retaliation and of coercive measures against the opposition. So I'm going to leave it here, and I leave for the Q&A any possible questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Casani. Now it's Professor Nur's turn. Yes, hocam, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim, and also let me to thank Dr. Francesco and Dr. Alfonso, because this was actually a plan that was appeared in an international conference a few months ago, and here we are. I'm very much grateful for their presence and for accepting our invitation. I will be talking about Jordan because while we were thinking about the title of this event, this panel, we wanted to focus on basically the monarchies in the Arab Middle East, and then we also have seen, that there are similarities, considerable. In considerable extent similarities between Morocco and Jordan. And it's not just the regime type and the monarchical rules in these two countries, but it is also two countries in the region that also normalize their relations with Israel. So I will first start with this table, which was published in Journal of Democracy. It was an article co-authored by Shin Yom and Gregory Gauss. And they were paying attention to the regime types in the MENA region right after the Arab uprisings. And then they found out that the monarchical states have become more resilient in terms of coping with the protests. And more than that, they were also very successful as compared to the other cases in the region, particularly as compared to the republican rules, the monarchical rules. They found the ways, like Jordan and Morocco, they initiated reform programs and they consolidated their rules. So Morocco, Jordan, Kuwait, according to them at the same time, yes, they faced with significant protests, but the demands were moderate. And then we can't say that these two countries, they were immune from the Arab protests, but they were not engulfed by the Arab protests. So that's why actually that was the main question also in my mind while I was also preparing this slide. And then I argue that there is a relationship, a nexus between the regime type and the regime persistence, stability at the same time, particularly when we consider the 2011 protests onwards. There are, of course, different ways of explaining the stability in Middle Eastern contexts, such as cultural approach, institutional approach. Both they have something to say, something to offer to the discipline. But my main concern was, or main issue that I would like to highlight today is political openings have been used as a constantly have been used by the Kingdom of Jordan. And then it worked in terms of sustaining the stability. And then if we look to the first actually protests in the country, which began by 1989 in the southern city of Ma'an, which were also forming the backdrop of the monarchy, the backdrop of the political legitimacy in the country, it actually alarmed the kingdom in the beginning, because it was for the first time that there has been, let's say, a public unrest happening in the region, basically in the areas that the regime acquired its traditional support. And then the regime implemented, put in force political liberalization policies, which also led the kingdom to legalize the political parties after a long period of time, and then with Al-Midhaq Al-Watani, the national charter, to also gave kind of a rise to political pluralism and political landscape for more contestation. According to several scholars, since this time and onwards, the Jordanian case or Jordanian path towards democratization can be regarded as either electoral authoritarian. It also stated that it can be defensive democratization, monarchical pluralism. This was one of my also point that I raised in 2012, right after the elections. And then for some, like Schwedler and Curtis Ryan, it can be regarded as a hybrid regime, specifically after 2003 parliamentary elections. Well, we can also divide Jordanian path towards democratization into a comprehensive two era. The first era was the first, actually, the path since 1989 onwards. And then in the second era, we started to see that, something that I would like to quote from Francesco Colin, who is also with us today. Just 1 minute. So the Jordan between protests and reforms. Actually, I called this period as the technocratization of the area of the political, which is, I think, that it still continues today. Well, this idea of technocratization, depoliticization of the area of the political landscape has been already argued by Maghraoui in 2002, specifically for the case of Morocco, and Francesco Colin also in his article published in 2023 also argued about that actors and issues are included and excluded from the arena of public deliberation as the spaces for the citizens' participations are transformed. And that's why it becomes crucial to understand how these two dynamics play out concretely. So in the case of Jordan, we can also see that by the Al-Aqsa Intifada. Alfonso also mentioned about this, how it also affected Jordan. Basically, by 2000 onwards, Jordan also felt the necessity in terms of, building new mechanisms to both continue the political liberalization, but at the same time taking into consideration the stability of the regime and the monarchy. And one of the main policy during this period of time was entrusting the National Agenda Committee, comprising 27 members, which aimed to actually initiate considerable, let's say, substantial political changes. In addition, identity politics has also become a part of the kingdom's policy, which was also in the form of Al-Urdun Awalan, the Jordan First campaign, that put the emphasis on actually, once again, Jordan is Jordan. When we look into the details about the Arab Spring or Jordan's Arab Spring, which was which led the Jordanians to took the streets by 2011 onwards, we have seen that the process of democratization in Jordan very much engaged in reshuffling the governments, and there has been reshuffling of the prime ministers and also the government. It is also very important to state at this point that there has been, yes, protests in the country, but these protests, they were basically, were not calling for the regime change, but rather was limited to economic reforms and political change. If I would like to also go into detail about categorizing this period of time, what we can see is, which is I think very important for the resilience of the monarchy, the nature of the opposition. The nature of the opposition in Jordan is very important because with the Arab uprisings, we have the emergence of the group of Hirak, which is formed by the East Bank tribes. And then their demands were also related with economic rights, but economic rights as the new area of the political, which is already stated by Sarah Ababneh. The second thing that I would like to raise is the institution of monarchy itself, which is the key pillar of stability. And if Dr. Ibrahim, by the way, I realize that I have 2 minutes. The politicization of the area of the political, we can also see this in the low turnout ratios and also the decline in the support of the political parties. And then finally, regional context and the war in Gaza. We started to see the implications, the reflections of the war in Gaza, and of course the escalation in the region on Jordanian monarchy. I need to mention here that one of the main reasons why the war in Gaza or the escalation in the region at the same time is affecting the domestic and external policies of the kingdom and also stability, it is closely intertwined with the fact that Jordan has always been a part of one way or another the Palestine question. And one of the main things here is Jordan is in a way trying to show in their statements, such as foreign minister, that Jordan cannot become a homeland for the Palestinians, which is in a way addressing to any further influx of refugees from the West Bank. So this is one of the main concerns for the regime. And in dealing with this, we have seen for the last 1 year, Jordan's constant balancing act during the war in Gaza. So the kingdom reiterated its position on two-state solution frequently and calling for humanitarian ceasefire. And one of the UN resolutions at the General Assembly right after the escalation is also called as Jordan's resolution, because it was also brought into the UN mechanism by the Kingdom of Jordan. And Jordan's foreign policy towards the Palestinian issue is strictly rest on two main pillars. The two-state solution is the only path to achieve the peace, and Jordan is very concerned about the potential displacement of Palestinians into Jordan borders. So in line with this is going to my last words. With the Arab uprisings and what happened in the region in the last 1 year, what we can see is Jordan is one of the main countries in the region calling for the de-escalation. And then in order to unpack the position of the country and then related it with its domestic politics, we definitely see that Jordan has traditional protectors. One of them is the United States, and the other one group of states is the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, UAE. And then if we also consider the Jordan's relations with Israel, that dates back to Wadi Araba 1994, it seems like that the state-society relations and let's say the postponement of any kind of the delay in the ceasefire may let the kingdom to think about how let's say they can cope with the domestic the unrest going on in the country today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all these insightful presentations. Now we will move on to the question and answer session. It will take around 15 minutes. But before we start, I have a very important request for you. Please write your questions. You can write your questions, by the way, onto the chat section. But while writing your questions, please try to be as clear and as compact as possible, okay? Because as you may appreciate, it is not possible for all speakers to answer very long and provoking questions and so forth. And in order to gain time, actually, while our esteemed audience writing their questions, I want to ask one question to the speakers, to our speakers. I really wonder, actually, how will the recent U.S. presidential elections will affect the Abraham Accords? I'm talking about the future of the Abraham Accords. And is there a possibility, do you see any possibility that the Trump administration will follow a new track or everything will be same? Thank you very much.
Maybe I give it a go, and then Alfonso, you complement with everything that I forget. Yes, the election of Trump has been followed with a lot of excitement in Morocco, precisely because of one of the nuances that Alfonso mentioned in his presentation of this bundle nature of the deal, of the signature of the normalization with Israel, not the United States recognition of the Western Sahara, of Moroccan sovereignty over Western Sahara. And even if the Biden administration did not really change its policy in terms of its stance towards Moroccan's position in the Sahara, the presence and the return of Trump is recognized as something that can give another push to Moroccan project of sovereignty there. And a lot of media attention after the election has been focused on that. The question remains open as to what is going to be the impact in terms of relation to Israel. Because of this bundle deal nature, does the Trump election means that Morocco is going to also reinforce its cooperation with Israel, in spite of the war in Palestine, in spite of what a Trump election means for the war in Palestine? It's an open question, but there has been less attention to there's been more attention, once again, because of this bundle nature deal, to the fact that Trump is a friend of Morocco for its sovereignty in the Sahara. Unless it's less present in the public debate, at least this what that may mean for the relationship with Israel. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Casani.
Yes, well, I have to agree with Francesco, and we don't have a proper answer about what's going to happen in the future. I would stress that the change that the U.S. recognition of Morocco's sovereignty of Western Sahara meant for Morocco's foreign policy. It turned Morocco's foreign policy into a more uncompromising, more inflexible foreign policy, more prone to conflict, and the different diplomatic crisis experience between Morocco and Germany, Spain, France need to be understood in that sense. So in that sense, I would say it is a push for Morocco's foreign policy, and just as it is a push, and also mentioning this bundle deal nature that Francesco said, we could expect a strengthening of Israel's Israeli-Moroccan relations, I'd say.
Thank you very much. Dr. Nur, is there anything you want to add?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, what I can say at this, for the moment, for the time being, is that Jordan's main policy and relations with Israel will seems like that going to be on a tightrope because of the growing, pro-Palestinian, we can say, discourse among the Jordanians. But at the same time, the kingdom is going to pursue a policy, more a pragmatic policy at the same time, because continuing the normalization of relations with Israel for the kingdom for a long period of time is also a guarantee of Jordan is Jordan, in order not to see that actually Jordan become an alternative homeland for the Palestinians. So this is really going to be very intriguing to follow in the upcoming days. But I don't think that there is going to be a very radical or a structural change in terms of Jordan's policy towards what's going on in the region. And then the relations might be a little bit these days set back, but for pragmatic reasons, it seems like that we will going to see, more in detail in the upcoming months.
Thank you very much. Actually, we have some questions. I would like to ask them. The first one is coming from one of our MA students, Aya Agadi. I think, and this question is actually directed to Dr. Casani. I think Aya demands little bit more evaluation, more elaboration on what you have said during your presentation, stating that Morocco is having a good relation with Israel, but in reality, Morocco doesn't support Israel. Can you little bit elaborate more on this, Doctor?
Yes, and I'm sorry if it wasn't very clear during the presentation, as you always talk in a hurry. What I mean is that actually Morocco never had explicit relations with Israel, in the sense that it had not normalized these relations, just as either Jordan or Egypt had done. But it continued to have a strong, like we can actually trace a relation between Morocco and Israel. An implicit relation, we could say, that goes back first, for instance, during the Mohammed V times, at the time of independence in the 1950s, because of the wide minority of Jews living in the country. So that's actually going to force Morocco to take a stance in the creation of Palestine, Israel. It's going to collaborate in the emigration of Jews towards Israel. But I'd say that it's going to take an even further stance during Hassan II, his son, Hassan II's regime, which finishes in 1999. Where Hassan II is actually going to have quite a lot of diplomatic rapprochements with Israeli prime ministers. It's going to be actually a very active moderator in the peace process and the diplomatic process also regarding Israel. That's what I meant by saying that we can actually see a long-standing relation between Morocco and Israel, even though it had not led to the normalization of relations up to 2020.
Thank you very much, Dr. Casani. We have a question for Dr. Colin as well. I think the audience wants to know more about the resentment and disappointment of Moroccan public vis-a-vis political Islam represented in the country. Can you elaborate more on this, Doctor?
Sure, no, of course. And I will give an introduction, but since Alfonso is the expert on Al-Adl wal-Ihsan, maybe he can complement also my reply. But I think that there is a lot of disappointment. And once again, political Islam, right, is a spectrum, and different groups have different ways of implementing their vision of political Islam or of Islam as a political project. But I think that a lot of dissatisfaction for the PJD is established because of the great imbalance between what was promised or what seemed to be happening when it started its first government in 2011 and what it actually happened in terms of change, in terms of the political situation and or even the socioeconomic better situation for the life of daily Moroccans. The PJD campaigned to end corruption, to change the political system, to bring more democracy. It was a platform that was very much also about transparency and a change against this sort of well-entrenched practices of corruption and backdoor deals, which didn't happen. And because of all the constraints of working in a political system such as the one of Morocco, where once again the king maintains a big hand over the control of the executive system, and besides the centrality of the king, there is also a system of cronies and of authorities and officials that do not have a lot of interest to change the situation for what it is. and ultimately, once again, when this is complemented with the signature of the Abraham Accords, this becomes the moment in which all the promises, all what the PJD could have done to change Morocco ends, literally, because of even the uncompromising stance of the support for Palestine as both an Arab and an Islamic issues, an issue that concerns the Ummah. It's something that is going to be tainted by this recognition of Israel, of a normalization of diplomatic relationship. I don't think that there is as much disappointment and resentment towards Al-Adl Walisan. It's a very different actor. It's a different actor, especially because of its relationship towards the monarchy and the fact that it's very much and very openly critical of the governance style of Mohammed VI and even of Hassan II. And this being critic is also what makes what makes Al-Adl Walisan an illegal but tolerated political mover, right? That does not have the right to participate to election, that does not have the right to operate kind of in the light. But we are seeing during these protests for pro-Palestine that this movement is having a fundamental role in terms of mobilization, in terms of leveraging its members and its network to fill the streets and call for people to, at an organizational level, it's going to be the Moroccan Association of Human Rights that sort of coordinates the call between different organizations, but the mobilization of people, of actual people in the street, it's also going to be very much sustained by Al-Adl Walisan, which is also engaged this process of sort of opening more towards less political Islam, more civic, democratic idea of state and of rule that contributes to this sort of legitimization, rather. I don't know if Alfonso, you want to add some things because it's your topic actually.
No, I think you explained it very well. I'd say it's harder to measure the disappointment regarding Al-Adl Walisan because it doesn't participate in the election. But it's true that we're witnessing an evolution of its political stances, moving towards more pro-democratic, political participatory means, and living in that sense an explicit support of Islamic rhetoric. And in that sense, it walks a thin line between political Islam and social movement, pro-democratic rhetoric, which I guess might gain the support of some, might disappoint other ones. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Since time is ticking, I will take two more questions. One of them is for Dr. Nur, okay? And the other question is, the last question will be for all of you. Okay. First, the question is for Professor Nur. It is coming from one of our MA students again, Lucia. In what ways do tribal and local affiliations support or challenge the monarchies in these nations? What do you think, Koja?
I think we have very limited time left, so. Well, it's a very good question, and it is very important for the stability and the consolidation of the regime, because as I stated in my presentation, it has been for the first time that the regime was confronted with an unrest, a kind of an opposition emerging from the southern provinces, where the regime actually acquired its primary loyalty. However, with the 2011, this also turned itself into the form of Hirak, which is again formed by the East Banker, we can say, tribes. But I would like to say that at the current stage, because we can also talk about something different maybe in 10 years' time, I don't know. But for the time being, the opposition that has been brought by the Hirak movement does not oppose a very radical threat, we can say, or a considerable threat against the monarchy. They have demands, and they want these demands to be met. But this does not include, for the moment, I'm saying, to be in such a kind of a position that can, change the rule or can bring a very structural transformation of power. But this does not underestimate the fact that the state-society relations needs to be also reconsidered, especially the regime, in order to deal with the situation in 2021 again entrusted a royal committee for modernizing the political system. So we will also going to see what is going to be the products of this political liberalization movement.
Thank you very much. And the last question is, does the existence of Hamas since the 1980s sort of delaying the progress of the two-state solution in Palestine? This question belongs to one of our students, Abu Bakar Jallo. What do you think, doctors?
Let me just be really briefly, because it's a long topic and we'll be talking a lot about this. But to be honest, if we have to look at today, I don't think that the existence of Hamas is the main obstacle to this to the two-state solution or to any solution really, but rather the stance of the current Israeli government. Just to be really concise. Yeah.
Yes, I agree with Francesco. I'd say that certainly it might not have helped, and it has not helped to gain international support, maybe from different states. But I don't think that Israel also has taken any steps to move towards the two-state solution since the Oslo Agreement.
And I can say that maybe as a kind of summing up about this topic in general, nothing happens actually in a political vacuum. So this is actually a problem. What is exactly going on the region and the escalation as well? We need to, I think, have a broader, comprehensive framework to understand how all this escalation came about. And that's why we have academia to understand all the actors.
Thank you very much. I think it was a great discussion. Thank you very much for all the insightful presentations. And I would like to thank to the audience for their presence and for their contributions with the questions. Hopefully in the future, we will be together again with a different topic, with different speakers and so forth. Thank you very much once again.